Thank you very much. Curtis made the comment before lunch that he was in a tough spot. I would say I'm in a tougher spot following Carlos, following lunch, and right before break. So I know everybody's at a lull right now, but hopefully I can get us through the afternoon here. I am from Panasonic Smart Mobility office. I know that Peter has already presented on some of the work that UDOT is doing with us. I'd like to also, maybe before I jump in, thank NCFOR for including Panasonic in this presentation, as well as UDOT and their partnership has been awesome. It really has. Carlos's last slide there was a workforce slide. I think it's really important for everybody to recognize that innovation is tough, and especially when you're using public dollars, it's really tough to justify. But them doing that is paving the way for a new future of workforce. And there is, we all know, an age gap in the workforce in any public agency. I used to work at the Colorado Department of Transportation, and we saw that firsthand. Technology helps gap that, or bridge that gap, I should say, by bringing new, young, energetic people into our industry. And I think that's really, really important. So I commend UDOT for the work that they're doing and going out on a limb and investing in innovation for the purpose of safety. So I'm not going to reiterate or try not to reiterate a lot of what Peter said. Him and I talked last week, and I said, Peter, I don't want to repeat everything you said. So rather than talking about the specific use case here in Utah with the snowplow priority and transit signal priority, I'm going to talk a little bit more about Panasonic as a whole. And people are probably thinking, what is Panasonic doing in this industry? Aren't they selling cameras and microwaves? That is, yes, historically what we have done. But there's been a change that Panasonic has really taken, especially in the transportation and energy industry. And so I'll kind of talk a little bit about what the Smart Mobility Office is, and then I'll quickly touch on the Cirrus by Panasonic software itself, and then we'll do a little bit of Q&A. So the Smart Mobility Office is really, it's an incubator. Our headquarters is in the Denver area, right out by the airport. The purpose of the Smart Mobility Office and the incubator itself was to address mobility and energy and the intersection of those two things. So Zach's presentation earlier, there's a lot of similarities in things that have already been talked about today, but Panasonic has been focused on this, and more importantly, focused on the business to consumer sales of hardware and things to more of a software-based approach, and how do all these things start to come together. The incubator spun out 3 different businesses. From the left, kind of down and around and up to the right, is actually the order in which they all spun out. So the business group that I am in is Cirrus, and that is the connected vehicle V2X software platform that enables the bidirectional communication as well as the operational workings of any connected vehicle ecosystem, much like UDOT has here. The bottom piece is our business unit called PEFSA. It is the least creative name for any business I've ever seen. PEFSA is the Panasonic E-Fleet Solutions of America. PEFSA is really it's a software that sits between our utilities and charging stations for electric vehicles. As we all know, there is a huge wave of electrification that's coming, starting with many fleets and thinking about transit agencies and other heavy-duty vehicles. The purpose of the software really is to help utilities manage the demand moving forward of electric vehicles, right? So rather than building new power plants, it's managing the demand that's going to come, and the software really does sit there and it helps better understand for utilities what's the demand on the grid going to be. On the fleet side, if you are a fleet that is transitioning to electric, just transitioning to electric is not a cost savings. There is a lot of strategy and operational efficiencies that you need to make sure you have in place, because just plugging those electric vehicles in is just going to get more and more expensive. So we sit on the backside of chargers to help fleets manage when those vehicles charge, how much charge, and at what time of day, right? So now we're looking at working collaboratively with utilities to manage that demand. And then the last business unit at the top right is called OneConnect, and it really is a telematics software. So we primarily focused initially on the two-wheeled market. So Harley-Davidson is one of our customers. This is the ability to manage your fleet of vehicles, or for OEMs to be able to see things like engine performance and other telematics type of data components that are really interesting to them. However, OneConnect also, from a managing things perspective, they also support industries like refrigeration in supermarkets, right? Where you want to make sure that your preventative maintenance is happening and that you're aware of when a specific unit might go down. There's big loss associated to that. All three businesses, though, as we as a transportation industry talk, you're probably sitting here thinking you have three separate business units that all could probably benefit one another, and you might have a similar customer, and that's exactly right. We are currently going through a process of evaluating where do these business units overlap, and how do we compound the benefits to a customer by bringing these three business units together? So, for example, connected vehicles. So Peter had talked about it briefly about transit signal priority. Increasing the throughput of a transit vehicle is going to it's going to increase the efficiencies of the operation, and as transit fleets are starting to convert to electric, right, now we can start to improve efficiencies both en route and while that vehicle is parked in a yard, right? So managing the overall benefit from all three business units. I think when Jeff reached out and we talked about kind of what should we talk about, it was some of the other engagements that Panasonic has specifically in our connected vehicle market. We're working with the folks down in TxDOT right outside the Tesla Gigafactory. UDOT, obviously, the Georgia Department of Transportation. We've been doing work with Ford and their mobility group around the use of telematics data and what does that mean from a connected vehicle perspective. UTA, we also have a program here in Utah with FedEx, so starting to look at freight signal priority. Where can we start to move middle mile or even long haul trucks away from, say, a port or some sort of yard, improving the efficiency of that movement at signalized intersections is really valuable both to the operation side, but as well to the infrastructure side, right? So now thinking about things like air quality or even the wear and tear on pavement as heavy vehicles are stopping more frequently, if we can eliminate that and give priority to those vehicles, what does that mean for both sides? And it's a huge economic impact that it has as well, right? Being able to support in the efficient movement of goods is a huge value to any industry. With that being said, we also have a partnership in LaGrange, Georgia with Honda and Kia. At the Kia manufacturing plant, they produce three different models of vehicle, the Telluride, the Sorento, and one other. But they're a really interesting operation. It's fascinating. If you ever get a chance to see production like that, it's really wild. They have 3 hours of inventory on hand. So it's an as needed or just in time. So their logistics providers are held to a really high service standard because if the material doesn't get there in time, then the actual assembly line has to pause and wait for that material to show up. So they have huge penalties for being late. On the flip side, at the end of the assembly line, the state of Georgia gets taxes on every vehicle that crosses what they call the money line. Those vehicles are sold before they go off the line, and so they're receiving that economic benefit by getting vehicles through the assembly line more quickly. And then the last is the initial project where I got my first introduction to Panasonic, and that was with the Colorado Department of Transportation along the I-70 mountain corridor. So like the struggles that Utah's having in the Little Cottonwood Canyon, we have at a larger scale on I-70, and the economic impact that the I-70 mountain corridor has during wintertime is huge. So I'll play a quick video that's going to show the work that we're doing in Georgia, and it also will highlight some of the connected vehicle applications and how it actually works in real world.
What we're seeing here is a great partnership between GDOT and the RAY and Panasonic and Federal Highways on an opportunity to leverage our physical infrastructure and overlay a digital element to it.
We want to showcase this technology to the end user or to any stakeholder that is interested in the technology. We're going to see what it looks like to receive information from the vehicle, have that vehicle talk back to the roadway or the infrastructure, and then get sent up to the cloud. One of the use cases that we will be demonstrating as part of this project is a hard braking event. When traffic happens, when there's a lineup of cars, a lot of times folks will brake very hard. How cool would it be if we were notified in advance of that traffic line or traffic congestion ahead?
All right, we're going to come down to the ramp here. I'm going to simulate a hard braking event by slamming on the brakes.
Panasonic and Cirrus, their cloud-based system, is going to hear the data from that car and from that hard braking event, and they are going to create a warning information for other drivers like us that a slowdown is occurring, giving more visibility and a heads-up warning to drivers that there is a slowdown ahead can increase and improve the safety as well as the efficiency of our highways and interstates by reducing that traffic.
Another use case that we have is a work zone warning. We all know of or seen those static signs along the roadway, and those are utilized to communicate of upcoming construction areas or zones. The work zone warning brings that same messaging to the individual driver inside the vehicle.
We're coming up now to an active work zone, and there is this need for us to have all these cones and barrels up, as you can see. So through the work zone alerts, we're able to send out, before you even see a cone, the driver's alerted of the work zone ahead. And that's really all about reducing congestion, keeping our workers safe and drivers safe as they go through.
One of the use cases that we are providing as part of this engagement with GDOT and the RAY is a weather event. The weather event essentially makes these vehicles weather sensors so that they know what's happening in that stretch of roadway.
Now I'm going to simulate a weather event here by turning on my windshield wipers to simulate that it is raining.
If a vehicle is telling us through its data packet that the windshield wipers have been turned on, the speed is reduced, and the vehicle is losing traction or connection with the road surface, we might be able to deduce that there is a weather event like rain or snow that is causing the vehicle to hydroplane or to slip around on the ice.
This is all incredibly important because this gives us an immediate feedback from drivers on the road, and that's really important for us in managing these systems and improving safety and mobility for all as they traverse these roads.
Another use case that is very important to daily operations is disabled vehicles or vehicles that have been involved in an accident. The crash alert lets the driver know that there is an accident or a disabled vehicle up ahead.
All right, so now I'm going to come bring the vehicle to a stop and press this button here on the dash to simulate that we have been in a crash. So this communicates through the radio that our airbags have been deployed in this car. So telling all of the cars through the connected vehicle radio in this car that we have been in a crash. So cars that pass by us will get that information and alerts will pop up. Roadside infrastructure that is nearby will pick up that same information from our radio and send that back to Cirrus into the cloud and populate that back into our management systems immediately that there has been a crash that has occurred with our vehicle. We can immediately notify first responders, fire, emergency, police to get to the incident to help injured drivers faster, to clear the roadways for congestion issues, and that further reduces things like secondary crashes that occur when we have these major incidents.
This is just the tip of the iceberg as more vehicles become connected and as we have larger and larger streams of data. And ultimately, that's what we're all striving for. How do we eliminate deaths and crashes in transportation? And we're leading the way here in Georgia with this VitaX technology and the partnership between Georgia DOT, the RAY, Panasonic, and Kia.
So you can see how the actual application of connected vehicle information is transmitted between the, and so this slide here really kind of just shows that vehicles have a lot to say. There's sensors all over your vehicle, really anything that beeps, buzzes, honks at you, whatever, there's a sensor tied to that. And OEMs are receiving all of that information back, right? So thinking about, I think that the question came up earlier about the Little Cottonwood Canyon, and how do we identify vehicles that have a certain number of people in it, right? From an occupancy perspective. You think about you're driving down the road in your truck and your dog's in the passenger seat and something's just beeping at you. It's the seatbelt. It picks up that there's weight in that passenger seat and your dog doesn't have a seatbelt on. All of those type of things are really useful for operations within the transportation industry, and really can loop into the connected vehicle world, and we can start to share these pieces of information. This is just a very high level overview of how it all works. There's the onboard equipment, which is a radio that communicates over the 5.9 gigahertz spectrum to a roadside unit, and then all of that data then goes into the Cirrus cloud, and that's really where the data management and analytics can be done. There's three main components that UDOT and others who have connected vehicle systems need to make sure that is operating. And the first is the actual operation of that system itself. So instilling confidence in deployment is really what the Cirrus platform is helping our customers do. You want to make sure that the things that you put in the field are actually doing what you say, especially when we start to talk about safety and other applications where people are really relying on that services. And then the second piece is delivering those actual services to your stakeholders. So snowplow priority, transit signal priority, and even emergency vehicle preemption. And then the last is start to take that data and do something with it, right? Whether it's a planning perspective, whether it's a real-time operations, doing something with that data is really, really valuable. And we all know how valuable data has become. Our Cirrus Panasonic group has historically done really four main things. We have deployment solution services, so helping get devices out to the field. The Cirrus platform itself, then system management, and then the last is, I've talked about connected intersections quite a bit. The V2X ecosystem or world has been a moving target for everybody. It's always been a chicken and the egg scenario where the OEMs are looking at infrastructure owners and saying, are you going to put these radios on the side of the road? Because if you don't, then there's no point in us enabling our vehicles to communicate to the road. So it's constantly been back and forth. So when we start to look at highway operations and highway use cases, that penetration rate isn't huge. Panasonic pivoted a while back along with UDOT and many other agencies that were very interested in connected vehicles, and we pivoted to the intersection where we can give fleets of vehicles services such as priority or preemption. So priority, those of you probably heard me say priority and preemption. Priority is essentially extending that green light, and preemption is changing it to green. I'll just jump to the right side of this slide. I think we've talked about all these services, but I think it's really important to understand kind of the fringe value that these things bring other than just getting the bus there on time. But now we start to make our transit services more reliable. We keep talking about, Carlos brought up, now we got to get people to actually ride in these services. I'm from Denver. We are like Utah. We don't ride public transit. Well, we just don't. But the more we're able to make that service reliable, we don't ever want to make the bus early to a bus stop, but we want it to be on time, and that is a huge thing. So starting to look at how transit signal priority increases reliability and increases ridership is a huge thing. Looking at emergency vehicle preemption, we start to think about getting vehicles to the scene of an incident faster is saving lives, right? That is, we live in communities and we may or may not know it, but our fire departments, our police departments are all rated on their response time. That impacts our insurance, right? So if you're the fire chief, your number one thing is getting your crews to an incident faster and safer. And so the safer piece of this, and a really interesting thing that we learned and a lot of interviews with first responding agencies was not only getting them there safer, but also from a liability perspective. If you are a fire truck and you are approaching an intersection and you're anticipating that you're going to get a green and it doesn't turn green, you're still going to go through that red light, probably with a little bit of caution, but you're going to go through that red light. If there's an incident or a crash that happens when that vehicle is going through the red light, the liability headache for that fire department is huge and the cost is huge. So just turning lights green to get first responding vehicles through those intersections from a litigation perspective is enormous. So if we can guarantee that that light is going to be green is really, really important. And again, these are a lot of the same things that we've been talking about here, but they all have, pivoting to the intersection is really creating additional benefit for the connected vehicle world. And that is it.
Question?
Sure, questions, yeah.
We've got a couple of minutes for Q&A, so if people have questions. I think everybody's ready for, oh, there we go.
So kind of coming into this with limited knowledge about Panasonic's role, what does Panasonic have to gain by partnering with this community and being on the cutting edge of innovation? Why would it be on Panasonic's radar
Sure.
with 99 other technology companies that are out there? Tell us why Panasonic is leading out.
Yeah, I think for Panasonic, it was diversifying, right? We look at the headquarters in Japan and all the sustainability and all of the safety elements that go on there. When they looked at the U.S. market or Panasonic North America operations, it was very just like build things and sell them. They wanted to do something, right? They wanted to do something that aligned with their mission and with what they were doing in Japan. And so looking at transitioning from the hardware business to the software business, but for a good thing, that's really where the business kind of spurred from. And so we are a startup inside of Panasonic. We are funded annually. We go and we, convince them to continue to fund us. And so it really is, for Panasonic, I think it's part of their mission.
Can we get a round of applause? Oh, do you have a question? We have one more question.
Sorry to stand up late, but with the state versus the cities versus the counties, it appears this really looks good for a city to take on Panasonic to try and get their emergency vehicles or whatever through major intersections. Are you campaigning to go to cities and get this done? Because their funding is limited just like everybody else's. So how do you sell them on the idea that this can be beneficial for them with just saving one accident with one of their fire trucks?
Sure, yeah, great question. To answer the first part of the question, we focus our time on the infrastructure owner and operators, right? So when we look at an intersection, depends on the state and how the state is structured from who owns and operates the signal, depends on who we're talking to, right? So it could be UDOT, or it could be Virginia DOT where they own most of their signals, Georgia DOT. When we look at what's the value to them, there's a safety element, right? There is a safety element of being able to communicate what's happening with vehicles on the roadway and communicating that back to the infrastructure. But they also look at it as innovation. Like, a lot of government agencies know they have to innovate. And this is a really good place to do that. And if it means, even Blaine Leonard here in Utah, he is an amazing champion of the safety value that this technology can bring. And to him, saving one life is worth it. And that is really, really important. And I think that's something that, as a whole, we need to approach these large challenges, as Carlos showed with some of those numbers. We got to start somewhere, right? And saving one life does matter. using the connected vehicle technology makes it extensible to not only do those safety things, but now you can do operational efficiency type of things as well. So there's additional value. It obviously depends on what the goal of the agency is and what they want to accomplish first. Almost everybody every single agency is going to say safety somewhere in their goals, whether it's number one or number two. But there's other things, and supporting in those other things is really what we're doing. And oftentimes it does come from a groundswell of stakeholders, whether it's the transit agency, the fire chief, the local fire chief that wants these services. That's also where a lot of the momentum comes from.
Great answer. Well, time's up. So I appreciate you, Tim. Can we get a round of applause for Tim?